My name's Anthony Avillo. I'm a Deputy Chief with North Hudson Regional Fire and Rescue. We are in New Jersey, just across the river from Manhattan. Lincoln Tunnel is in our jurisdiction. We have about 80,000 people a square mile. So we kind of never have a fire without an exposure problem. I've been on the job 28 years. I started in the Weehawken Fire Department. And when we regionalized, we now run and cover the cities of North Bergen, Weehawken, Union City, West New York, and Guttenberg. What does that mean to you? Probably nothing. But like I said, we are extremely populated area. I'm a regional tour commander, as it says there, and I wrote the Fireground Strategies book. I teach at 2 different fire academies, and I also write for fire engineering articles in the magazine. So I'm also working on a new book that hopefully will be published next year. Today what we're going to talk about is organizational safety. And what I normally do is I sort of gauge this along the lines of the officers, you know, because what we want to talk about is a safety culture. We want to talk about an organizational feel for safety. And it's funny because you kind of know it when you see it. It's kind of hard to define a little bit, and you also know it when you don't see it. So these are some of the things we're going to be talking about today. Call the class Preparing for the Hard Environment. Where's the hard environment? Scream it out. What's the hard environment? The hard environment. Well, it's the fire ground, right? It's where we do our work. Now, in contrast, what would you think the soft environment is? Everything else. All the other areas is basically the soft environment. We're going to talk a lot today about how your actions in the soft environment dictate what you're going to do in the hard environment. That's a lot of the things we're going to talk about here today, which really is preparation for the hard environment. All right? Now, this is just a shot of where I work. This is Union City. Like I said, we never have a fire without an exposure problem. We're going to talk a lot about managing the fire ground, but many of the things we talk about here today have to be set up beforehand. They have to be set as expectations beforehand so that everyone operates sort of in the same manner. And it's nice to have like sort of a single department here, because sometimes you're working out in areas with lots of different people, and you know, people start to fight and stuff, and it doesn't work that well. So at least here, if you fight, everybody knows each other. And being from New Jersey, I'm probably going to insult just about everybody in here at some point. So if I don't insult you, get back to me later, and I'll give you a private insulting session. Before we get started, so you can understand me, can someone use that in a sentence? All right, good. What do you want to do with these things? So I have a guy from California that follows me around and writes down the words that I say, and then he asks me later, what was that word? What were you talking about? All right, how about that? Sentence. No, not really. Oh, maybe. All right, if I say that, you understand it, right? How about this one? That's a harder one. See, it gets a little harder. All right, you throw up all over the place. I mesh words together, so. And then the last one here, Jeet. Jeet. I hope you did, because we'll have lunch later. All right, so get that out of the way. If there's something I say you don't understand, make sure you raise your hand. Here's our primary objective. If you are an officer, if you're a firefighter, whatever you happen to be, whatever your rank is, that's all you have to do. Get them in safe, work them safe, get them out safe. That's it. If you can do that throughout your entire career, then you've been a successful person on the fire ground, all right? Especially as an officer. That's your only job, for your people to go home. Now, it's a little bit more complex than that, but the basics are that. If you keep that in mind, chances are you're going to keep your people safe, all right? Talk a little bit about the causes of LODD. We're going to talk about, we do a thing in North Hudson called the LODD Roundtable, and we do it on a bi-monthly basis. What the companies do is they review an LODD, and they bring the lessons learned back to the battalion. And we'll talk about this a little more in the next couple of slides. But one of the things we found there, and it's created some changes on our department for the good, is exactly what Science Daily found when they did research like this. They looked at 4 different reasons that firefighters get killed, right? Now, the first one, understaffing, under-resourcing, we generally can't do anything about, right? What do you guys write on your rigs? 3, that includes the officer? All All right, you ride just like we do. You know, and we have 80,000 people a square mile, and those are only the ones we know about. There's lots of people out there in Hudson County that we don't know about. But 80,000 people a square mile is a lot of people. And our staffing is 3 on a rig. And so you're very similar to what we are. I mean, same thing. We can't really do much about that. However, there's no one out there that tells you you can't bring more people in. And we'll talk a little bit about that. However, when you're bringing more people in to your fire ground, what do you have to make sure you do? Accountability, management. You got to manage those people. All right. The other ones we do have control over. Inadequate preparation for adverse events during operations. What are we talking about? What happens during operations, an adverse event that we're not necessarily prepared for all the time? What do you think? Just happened to you, right?
Catastrophic event.
All right, like what?
Backdraft.
Like a backdraft, right? Like a backdraft, where when something happens and you're not sure where all your people are. What else? What happens sometimes when that happens? The next thing that occurs is what? What do we hear over the radio? Maydays, right? Maydays. We're not so good at Maydays in the fire service. We're really not. You know, it's a very difficult operation to pull off, right? And even when you do it right, there's always little glitches, you know. There was the study done in Phoenix where they found that in order to get a guy, it took somewhere, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, somewhere around 50 minutes to find him, package him, get him out. It took up to a dozen guys to do it, and some of them got hurt and lost during the way. So a true Mayday is a very difficult operation on a fire ground. So these inadequate preparation for adverse events, these are the things that are what we, you know, perishable skills. We don't do them all the time. It becomes a problem when it finally occurs. And these are some of the things we'll talk about. If we're not sort of preparing in the soft environment for these things, when it happens in the hard environment, we have a very hard time pulling it off. The next thing, incomplete incident command procedures. You guys use ICS, right? All right, we're going to talk a little bit today about street ICS, which I find a lot more easy to swallow, so to speak. But again, this is another expectation that's set. You know, how we're going to operate on the fire ground. There should be policies there. There was a fire that I teach at one of the fire academies, and before we do class, a lot of times what we'll do is we will ask the students, you know, when was your last job? You know, who was there? How'd it go? There happened to be a really big fire in one of the towns down near the Jersey Shore. And we'll actually see some video of it later. One of the guys that came into class was talking about the fact that, you know, the command post was a mess. Nobody knew who was in charge, the whole thing. And so we said to him, what did you do? He said, we got on the scene, we stretched a 2.5 to the rear. I said, did you go to the command post? He said, no. I said, who told you to stretch a 2.5? Nobody. I said, well, what did you do after that? He said, we put the 2.5 down, we went over to rehab. I said, did you go back to the command post? No. So this guy actually, what was he doing? He was making it worse, and he was actually adding to the confusion that he was actually talking about, you know? So listen, the command post organization generally starts at the top and filters down into the ranks, but if the ranks are not supporting that, you know, and this is where we talk about the last one, policy and enforcement failure. That's one of the biggest problems we have in this business. We have policies, we don't enforce them, or we don't have the proper policies, and you know, enforce them is just a moot point, you know? And we'll talk about some of those things here today, all right? The last one, suboptimal personnel readiness. Here they're talking about training and fitness. Two big things in the fire service that we as a business have to take care of. So the things I'm telling you guys here today are probably not anything you don't know, all right? But what my job here today to do is to make you a little bit better. That's all I have to do here today is make you a little bit better. And if I'm able to do that, your potential is limitless. Then you can get a lot better, right? And most of the stuff I'm going to talk about, you guys have heard a million times. But we're going to sort of reinforce that stuff as we go along. And maybe give you some ideas that may help you out a little bit, all right?